Well, hi everyone. It is semi-final week. Well, it was, and we are here for our penultimate Sewing Bee Natter. And this week, as promised, we have the lovely Lizzie Curtis joining us back just to see if Lizzie's opinion has changed from the very beginning. But no spoilers, Lizzie. No spoilers. And also we have the lovely Becky Cole, who actually worked on the Sewing Bee. So it's going to be very interesting this week to find out whether or not, from Stuart's comments when he was on the very first one, to see whether or not how the programme may have evolved from there. So how is everyone? Lizzie, how are you? Oh, yes, sorry. And my co-host...
Rude. Right, I'm off.
Sorry, my co-host is the lovely Kim Suleman, who's actually at home this week. She's a very busy lady. She's usually gallivanting. She's been in Spain. She was in Edinburgh. Oh, she's been all over the place. But yes, hello, Kim.
Hello, my darling. Should I just go now?
It's been a very long week. I was in the dentist chair last night, and they said you have to have a deep clean, and I was fretting myself all month, and it was just an extensive scale and polish because I haven't been there since COVID, and I was in the chair sweating because I was thinking they're going to stick things right. Anyway, never mind. So now we've got all the formalities or unformalities out of the way. Well, you're all used to us by now. So Kim, we had a competition. Sorry, not a competition. We had a giveaway last week. With some beautiful Vaseline products. So who is the lucky winner, and why did we choose that comment?
So Elsie Stewart is this week's winner, and it was lovely. Elsie's comment was great because she's asked us to do some follow-up videos on tips and techniques, which was something Alistair and I had actually talked about anyway. So whether we do it or whether we ask some guests to come back and give some tips and techniques. So Elsie, taking that on board, watch this space. Make sure you've subscribed to the House of Alistair YouTube channel, and then whenever a new video lands, obviously, which will be some tips and techniques. And also, I want to talk to Alistair about some of his background that we've vaguely touched on. But if you ever watch him on Create and Craft, he comes out with some real gems that I thought would be lovely to share with yourselves. So well done, Elsie. Thank you very much. Now, this week, well, it'll be the last one next week, which is the final. So we may have a little bit of a special prize next week. So if you just want to comment, doesn't matter what you say, whether you agree or you disagree with us, it's absolutely fine. Or if you've got any suggestions, please let us know.
So we've got some lovely we've got a lovely new giveaway to go. So get your comments going. I know you're always quite willing to give your comments. So so anyone who doesn't know the lovely Becky Cole, who's sat there with radiant red hair, tell us a little bit about yourself and about this new project that you are doing.
Oh, wow, which project? There's two.
Right, well, let's go for the first one, which is going to be on a little channel called Channel 4.
Oh, yeah, that one. Okay, yeah, well, I suppose that classes as a project done because we finished that in November. The next one is, the other one is in progress. So I am Becky, and you may have seen me on Crate and Craft and various other things. I've been on Sewing Street as well, usually doing like brother machines and fabrics and etc. Sewn forever, and I've done a lot of TV costume. So I sort of walked away from TV in 2009, and then kind of fell back into it. So obviously there's the Crate and Craft stuff, but yes, I got a job as assistant sewing producer on the Sewing Bee in 21. So that was the previous season, not this season. I wouldn't be allowed to be here right now if I'd worked on this season. Mustn't give away any secrets. So that is, so I did that. And then last year I worked on Unique Boutique, which is what is about to be on Channel 4, which is my favourite thing I've ever done. Sorry?
Tell us a little bit about that. So what is the Unique Boutique about?
Okay, so the Unique Boutique is a high street shop. If you've ever watched things like The Repair Shop or Tattoo Fixers, that kind of concept of, it's very laid back, chatty. People can come in off the high street. I mean, they obviously can't, it was all pre-done, but the idea was this shop that people can come and talk to us if they struggle to find clothing on the high street that works for them. So we had wheelchair users, we had people with limb difference, we had people with prosthetics. It was basically a safe space for neurodivergent people with disabilities, people with body shapes that don't necessarily conform to what the high street caters for, and we would either make things for them or we would adapt off the peg items for them, give them advice. An amazing on-screen team working with them. I had an incredible team of sewers doing the work, and it was intense and crazy, but it was amazing. But bring the tissues if you watch it. It's on at 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock on Monday night, and then there's 4 episodes. That's 3, that's 4. 4 episodes, and it's being launched as a box set, so you can sit and binge the lot if you want to, but definitely have tissues on hand.
And then quickly tell us about your work in progress.
The work in progress. So this is, I'm now doing a book, which has been a lifetime goal for me, and it's sort of the brainchild of kind of the work I've been doing over the last couple of years. So 2.5 years ago now, I learned that I'm neurodivergent. I'm autistic and ADHD. My children are autistic and ADHD. Most of my family are. They didn't realise until COVID and everybody sort of got locked in their houses and everything went a bit crazy. So I've started doing a lot of work and documenting it on the socials about altering my wardrobe to be sensory friendly. And then obviously working with people like Jill in Series 8, Jill Thomas on the Sewing Bee. I've worked with so many people on Unique Boutique, and just people I've kind of met over the last 2.5 years has kind of created the concept of this book, which is making sewing accessible for everyone, disabled people, everyone, and that includes neurodivergent people. It's called All Access Sewing. It's full of projects and interviews and tips, how to set up your sewing room, special equipment you can have in your sewing kit, how to adapt your current wardrobe to accommodate. And you don't have to be disabled to use it. Anybody can. That's the all access part. I'm
cool.
So excited.
And I understand you, so if you want to find out about Becky's book and when it's going to be launched, it will be available to pre-order, and if you follow Becky on her social media, we'll put all the links into the top of the thing.
Stuff, yeah.
We'll put it on the top of the thing. I don't know what you call the top of the thing. Anyway, we'll call it the top of the thing. We'll call it a topper. There we go. So we'll put it in the topper, and Becky will keep everybody. I'm sure everyone's eyes will be poised, and there'll be a QR code that will be released.
Yeah.
So that's going to be really cool.
Yes,
now,
so it will hopefully launched in the autumn, but pre-order available in the next couple of weeks.
Fabulous. Now we also have, drum roll or table roll. We also have Lizzie.
You didn't give me a pre-warning for sound effects, Alistair.
Sorry, well, it's a makeshift sound effect. But we also have Lizzie Curtis. Now, Lizzie, you have a fantastic little freebie giveaway.
Oh yes, it's one of my little patterns. I've got 127, possibly 128, lost count really, of little patterns that are, I always call them my Sunday afternoon projects, because they could easily be started and finished easily within a couple of hours period, I'm sure. Depending on how quickly you have to do it, and depending whether you're on a live or not, then depends on how quickly you do it. But it's a little coin purse, and it's all done with crumb quilting. So it's all of using all those lovely little scraps that you might have lurking around and have no idea what to do with. And I think from memory, because this goes back a couple of years now, but the coin purse itself, the picture is old vintage Liberty fabrics that I acquired from our lovely friend Kim Porter. And it's just such a wonderful technique. You know, Becky talks about, you know, the mindfulness of, you know, some people have to go through to be able to create. And actually, when you're starting to stitch, and especially things like crumb quilting, you do need to, you have to relax. You have to relax. Otherwise, well, it just naturally happens that your shoulders drop and you start to enjoy the process. And sometimes it can be intimidating, but I'd like to think that there's a little video that goes along with it that I show you that actually it can be really fun. And I do love a little bit of crumb quilting. So yes, so the little purse is made up purely from a long strip of crumb quilting you can do, and then it has a little sort of a secondary strip, if you like, that tucks into a thingy, what's it, Alistair?
Well
like
done.
a topper, yes.
A topper, the thingy, what's it, through a gap. Anyway, it's dead easy and it's there for everybody. It's totally free. You don't need a code. There's no tricks, there's no gimmicks, there's no catches. Just go to the website lizzieCurtis.com, and I think Kim, you're going to put the code on the
What I'll do is I'll put the link on. Lizzie, thank you so much for doing that. It actually fits in really lovely because the Sewing Bee throughout have always keep talking about recycle, reuse, repurpose.
Yeah.
That straight into, usually it's the transformation challenge. Now, I know we'd never do things in order, but this week's transformation challenge on this utilitarian week was not necessarily things that I would personally go to do any crumb quilting or any reuse, recycle, repurpose. Not that I've got, although Grace, who is a very good friend of ours, will have a tabard in her cupboard. So
Yes.
Alistair, if you can find out where she keeps her cleaning products, you'll be able to nip in there and get hold of her tabard. Mind you, you'll feel the wrath of her when she finds out you've pinched her tabard. But to actually try and do a challenge with cleaning products, my mouth dropped, I have to say. I don't know what your thoughts were, Lizzie, on that particular challenge in the products.
Well, because funnily enough, the one product that came to mind, which they didn't have, was the sponges with the scourer. And I don't know why that came to mind straight away. It's like, my goodness me, what on earth would I do with that? But I think Esme said something about that actually, that's quite a useful product in itself for creating. And I'm thinking, I've obviously missed something somewhere in my life. But I tell you what I really liked. I loved Mia's gloves.
Yes.
I just loved that. I don't know how her mind works. She is, for a young lady, she is incredibly creative. And she immediately saw that she could weave those fingers together. I think she knotted in the end, which is just as good as. I thought that was genius.
And I also thought Vicky did deserve to win that challenge because actually the time it took her to do that woven fabric with the scouring pads. The only thing I will say is that at the very beginning of the show, before the transformation challenge came up, I thought, why has Esme got scouring pads around her neck? And then when the transformation challenge came up, and Patrick did comment about it, but I did think that Vicky took it to another level.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It was amazing. Becky, what?
I think, yeah, I did the same reaction as you. I was like, oh, interesting. And it's funny that you say about recycle, reuse and everything else. I mean, cleaning products are the least recyclable things. You think rubber and plastic and all of these things. And also, you wouldn't use cleaning products that you've already used. So you're not recycling anything. If you want to recreate that challenge, you've got to go and buy new. So actually, from an environmental point of view, completely the opposite message. And from a sensory point of view, the idea of all those scratchy things against your skin, I was sat there going, I don't know if I can watch this. But from a creative point of view, I think it was good fun. I think it was definitely forced them to think out of the box. You know, I know there's been a lot of debate on the transformation challenge. I don't think the show would suffer if it wasn't there. But I do think it is a bit of light relief for everyone. It's sort of just a bit of fun. It's not the serious sewing bit, is it? Even though it's part of the competition. But yeah, no, it was good fun, and I absolutely agree. I think Vicky definitely deserved to win that one.
Yeah. So sorry, Alistair, no, it was just the way it led in there. Obviously, the first challenge was the pattern challenge. Alistair, what did you know, coming from the background that you come from, what were your thoughts? Because I didn't think a trench coat, when the title of utilitarian clothing came up, if somebody had said to me, what garment would they choose for a pattern challenge, that trench coat would not have been my first choice. However, they did have that challenge. And Alistair, I was thinking about you with regards to that one, about the construction, etc. So what were your thoughts?
So I actually think what they should have done is they should have swapped the pattern challenge around with the boiler suit, because in actual fact, technically, what they should have done is, and this is only my humble opinion, but if you take the boiler suit, everything was about the rise, which is the bit that goes under your unspeakables, and it goes from front to back. But literally there is so much that can go wrong there. If the rise is too high, then it just nips and it creates so much tension and tightness. If it's too long, it means that when you start to stride, it means that the lower it is, it means that you feel the trousers almost like, I'm going to use the word chafing because that's going to be everyone will know what that means. So literally when you're walking like this, it constricts you, so it's not a nice flow. For me, I thought the pattern challenge, I thought, would have been a much better showstopper at the end, because they could have been really, really creative. I mean, they were very creative with it, but they could have been really creative with it then, rather than trying to make it. And I thought it was I know we're at the semi-final, but I technically thought that was a very, very tough, because they didn't get any extra time. I've written down here they got 5 hours.
5 hours, yes.
Yeah.
To do that one.
And they had to cut everything from scratch in that. Now, when you're dealing with something like 47 different pieces, you've already lost an hour by choosing your fabric, and well, probably an hour and a half choosing your fabric and working out what you've actually got to do. So I thought it was a little bit unfair. Also, when Patrick was talking about the undercollar, now, yeah, that's a very important point. The points on the collar is very important. I thought the fact that, you know, whether or not they got it left over right, I just didn't see that was actually something that should have been scored. I thought if it should have been on the technical ability and the actual physical sewing. So it was. So I just personally think I would have preferred it if they had swapped them around and they had actually done the boiler suit as the actual pattern challenge, because I just thought that creatively we could have seen a lot more from them with the trench coat, because it's more of a high sort of fashion item.
Yeah.
So I would have seen that. Again, it was a bit. I've put here about, you know, the buttons and about them being aligned. Well, you're not really gonna. The difficulty is when you've got something and you lie a garment, say, flat, you always need to, with something like that, you need to put it on, unless it's a commercial pattern where everything is precisely done. When you put it on the mannequin, you're able to put a little chalk dot there and then lie it flat and then see how out or not you actually are, and then take your stance from there. But I thought they all did really, really well. And I you know, Asma's was beautifully sewn. It was lovely impressed. But Mia's, I know it's not about color options, but I thought the pink actually was a very beautiful, and I could see a lot of men actually wearing that. You know, like Harry Styles and people like that. So yeah, I would have swapped them around. So what did you think, Kim?
Well, I was with you. I just thought that technically it was so difficult, that trench coat compared to the boiler suit at the end. And when you looked at the boiler suit at the end, you had 3 of them fitted those boiler suits to the models, and then Tony didn't. He had his very loose and baggy. He was always going to have a plus point in that respect. I also wondered why, for example, when they're sewing their buttons on, if they'd used a sewing machine, that would have given them a neater and more professional effect. And similarly, that one thing that is driving me nuts, I have to say, and there's a couple of them doing it, is as they're sewing, they're pulling the fabric through the back of the machine. I did think Asma's was great by the use of it was all Prim products. And another thing that Vicky did do, which I don't think, maybe that was the last challenge, I got mixed up because I had a lot of Prim products on there this week. A lot of the finishings and the clasps on the trench coat were Prim. And similarly, Vicky used them when she was hammering. That there's an easier way of doing it, by the way. There is that Prim product where you hammer the studs in, but there are easier ways of doing it. So I did think it was a very difficult challenge. I again thought that they all did amazingly. Becky, that leads me on to a question which we've asked before, or we've discussed before. The sewing machines that are actually on set, I would presume that they are production sewing machines, that i.e. that they're provided. So are they given any education as to how to use a sewing machine? Because we all know I can use 99 machines out of 100. However, it does take me a little few minutes from my machine to work out, oh, that button's actually in a slightly different place, or that's in a different place, or to release the foot, for example, to change the foot over is slightly different. Are they given any help or education pre-show on the machines?
They are sort of. So the machines they use are Janome machines. Everything has to be blocked out because brands and BBC. But the Janome machines, Janome have a very good relationship, and they sort of, I don't know whether they loan them, or there's rules within the BBC of what can be loaned and borrowed and paid for and things. But every year they provide the machines and then they take them back. So they had the air threaders and the sewing machines. The year I worked on it, and obviously there's 9 series, I've done 1 year of those. So how they've done it this year may be slightly different, but they have a lady from Janome came and kind of gave them an afternoon of just showing them how the machines work. And it's surprising really, because the machines are similar to the sort of the kind of brother ones that we use regularly. You know, they had the I can't remember if they had the thread cutter button, but you know, those sort of extra bits and pieces to it. That I'm always surprised when people have machines that don't have those things on. So they had all those elements of the machines, and they were taught through them all and given a chance to have a play with them. The air threaders we threaded up for them anyway, pre each challenge, because we knew what colours they'd need, and obviously they didn't have to change those colours. But yeah, they are given an element of training. That's the only training they received, though.
Because Mark Francis, who was on a couple of weeks ago, said he had a box of feet and he didn't know. He didn't, because we've said, oh, why didn't they use a walking foot? Why, when they're using they could have used a Teflon coated foot when they were using the leather or the plastics.
Yeah,
I saw them on the transformation challenge, and I don't think any of them put a walking foot on.
No.
Going through those thick cloths and all sorts, which would have helped them enormously.
Yeah.
So maybe it isn't depth training with the feet as well.
No, it's not. It is. I mean, how much can you teach 12 people on a sewing machine in a couple of hours, really? But they are given a machine in their apartments or hotel rooms, wherever they're staying. Again, we were still in COVID rules, so they were sort of in these self-contained apartments. But they're given a sewing machine to practice with after the shows.
Right.
And if that was me, I'd have the manual out, and I'd be going, right, I need to really, but I mean, that might be my need for, I hate not knowing the answers, but also part of my job is to know a machine inside out so I can show other people. So I don't like machines where I'm not sure what everything does. But I mean, the other thing on top of that is the filming days are so intense and so exhausting that the last thing you want to do when you get home is get back to your apartment is sit and read a sewing machine manual. So, you know, it's sort of ups and downs, but they are given those opportunities to have a bit of a practice. And also we are here So my role was assistant sewing producer. So I worked very closely with all the contestants on the made to measure challenges. But on the day-to-day stuff, I was part of the sewing team on the floor. We weren't allowed to help them sew anything or to help them, you know, if they had a problem with how to do this, how to do that on the patterns. However, if they weren't sure how the buttonhole foot worked, we could do a quick demo for them. So there was ways, you know, that didn't happen a huge amount, but we wouldn't go up to them and go, oh, you should use a walking foot on that. They'd have to go, I really want to use a walking foot, but I'm not sure how to fit it to the machine. Can you show me? If that makes sense.
That answers a lot of questions, really. Lizzie, what were your thoughts on the trench coat?
Well, what a challenge, isn't it, to start the show off with? And I'm with you guys, because the trench coat really was kind of like a made-to-measure garment, isn't it? It's got to fit well, it's got to, and so it looks nice and hangs well and all that sort of thing. So I did feel that perhaps that should have been the other way around. But by golly, what a challenge. And in 5 hours. And I'm thinking of my own experience. And you're right, Alistair, the choosing of the fabric. You're going to be stood there for 10 or 15 minutes thinking, what's the best fabric? Mia did exceptionally well with picking that pink. And because she was inspired by Harry Styles, wasn't she? She said that's who her inspiration was. And it was a very brave move, I thought, because obviously naturally you're going to go for the browns and the beiges and all that sort of thing. But the amount of techniques involved with putting that together, the cutting for a start, and for me, I'm thinking, okay, so, you know, use a rotary cutter. They've obviously been encouraged to do that, or it's something that they've learned and that's how they do it. That's absolutely fine. I'm not here to judge the fact they're using a rotary cutter for dressmaking, but I'm thinking the accuracy of the cutting leaves me in doubt that you would get a really accurate finish, because I'm always harping on to people about spend time on the cutting, because if you cut well, you've immediately got the accuracy. And as long as you've got your seam allowances correct, and, you know, mark your machine up, use a walking foot, whatever means it takes to keep to either the 5/8 of an inch. I don't know, do we use 5/8 of an inch anymore in dressmaking, or are we down to a centimetre or something? I'm not sure.
There's so many patterns now. Yeah.
So whatever it is,
you have to look at the pattern, don't you? Yeah, the patterns now have 1 centimetre, 1.5 centimetres, 5/8. So I presume on the pattern it will have had their seam allowance on there. Yeah.
But the cut is the first thing. Sorry, Alistair.
Oh no, I just got a little bit of an insight. So, for instance, when we do, whenever I designed a range of outerwear and things like that. So just to put everybody's minds at ease at home, technically there are specialist sewers that only put in sleeves. There's specialist sewers that only bag out the collar. There's specialist sewers that just bind the inside of jackets. There's specialist people who work on specialist machines that produce the buttonholes. On Savile Row, each buttonhole is actually handmade, and it's a funny little thing. It's a bit of a strange thing. It looks like a bit of a stiff cord, and we call this gimp. And what they do is they start from one end, and what they do is they go all the way around it by hand, and they're beautiful when you see them made. And they're all perfect. And when somebody is skilled, there are actually people on Savile Row. So, for instance, we call them the finisher. So that's the person that literally does all the magic by hand, putting in all the lining, doing all the jet pockets, doing all of that. And then there's a specialist who only specializes in buttonholes. And that person has their training is you sit there and you do a buttonhole, and the tailor takes it, throws it away, and says, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again, and spend years perfecting this. Not just anyone can just do it. So I actually thought, so just to put everyone's ease at home, that was I really felt that was a really, really difficult. And also on Lizzie's point about seam allowance. So seam allowance traditionally, the best thing to do is go to your local, well, maybe it's not your charity shop these days because you don't really get vintage pieces in there so much anymore. But you'll see that dresses that my gran would have worn, you do get rather thick seam allowance. And the reason for that is because when you actually had clothes, you would at home, you, dependent on whether you put on a little bit of weight at Christmas or summer holidays, you would let your dresses or garments out. And that's why they always put, and on Savile Row, they still do that in suits and also in trousers. The other thing to mention, commercial patterns now only have a centimetre seam allowance, and that's literally all you get, and that's to do with accuracy. Plus, when you're doing a big production lay, which is where they put all the fabric down and they cut out massive block. I mean, you're talking about an ice cream tub thick of fabric for the production runs. So there's lots and lots and lots of things that have changed throughout the years, but no one really puts in larger seam allowance. But if you are dressmaking at home and you want, say for instance, you've made a coat, that would be somewhere that I would say to you, add in extra seam allowance, even if the pattern doesn't have it, because it means that as you get older, you know, I'm product of that, you know, you put on weight. Kibbs.
No, me.
Yes, I've got my, oh, right, okay.
I wasn't talking about yours.
Literally,
I'm talking about mine, honestly.
well, mine are hurt, Kim. But literally, it is that thing where if you are making a beautiful coat, give yourself some extra seam allowance, because if you just put on a little bit of weight, you can let it out.
So what would you then say a seam allowance? You're advising a bigger seam allowance. What would be your recommendation, Alistair?
So I'll go for 5/8.
5/8, yeah. And not trim it down on the overlocker, because quite often what people will do is sew with that 5/8 of an inch, and then when they've put it all together, they'll then trim off that seam allowance on the overlocker as they're overlocking it. So you would suggest that you don't trim that off, right? You see, these are the little tips that Alistair has that we all need to know when we're dressmaking. I think this week what we've found is that we're actually comparing that trench coat and the boiler suit at the end. It's sort of, they are going hand in hand. I mean, the boiler suit challenge, as I say, was a little bit of an odd one, as an end one. The other thing, going back to the trench coat, it's only a couple of weeks ago where they were allowed to pre-cut their patterns because there was 30 odd pieces in it, and there was considerably more pieces in the trench coat, and that was encompassed in their time. So I did feel that it was a really hard challenge. What did you think, Lizzie, of the trench coats? I mean, particularly Tony's. He tried to do some top stitching, which didn't work quite as well as it could have done.
No, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Because the time element wasn't there. So by default, they're going to be rushing. And I feel that's such a shame, because all of those guys that this week they're incredibly talented. You know, you can't take that away from them. And it also depends on how they are. It's their personalities. For instance, Ashma, she's very calm. Very rarely do you see her ruffled. And so you feel that she is analysing everything that she does. She doesn't critique herself, but she's analysing everything and looking ahead and planning. Whereas if you're not like that, maybe Tony, I think he's great. I think he's brilliant. He's such a great character. And he's got the skill. And even though he hasn't been sewing that long, has he? Maybe 3 or 4 years, not long at all. It's amazing. And maybe he felt just a little bit overwhelmed with the challenge ahead of him. I think even me, I've been sewing since the year dot. I would be quite horrified seeing that trench coat in front of me. Obviously I'll be able to do it in 5 hours, not sure. But so I think maybe it's being daunted. I mean, Becky, you've been there. Surely they feel very intimidated by the crew and the people around them. And I know it's a competition, and it actually comes across as being they're very, very pally with each other. It's such a wonderful, cozy atmosphere. You really get to feel that. But how did they come across in, you know, when the cameras are away from them? How do you feel that they react to all of that?
They do form very, very close bonds, very close bonds. Like I say, especially in our series where they couldn't go home in between because of COVID regulations and things. I don't know whether they were still in place for this season or not, but they do form very intense bonds. And actually, it is a very stressful environment, but they all deal with it really well. I think, well, my bunch did. It is difficult because there's usually sort of 3 camera crews at any one point going around, and you have the overhead camera as well that kind of zooms in and stuff. So, you know, basically they're on camera 24/7 the whole time that they're sewing. They're on camera. So I think it was something like 120 hours of footage for every 1 hour of show.
Wow.
So I know there's been conversations about how much they get to show and how they tell the story, and especially when there's 12 of them. It's a bit easier when there's only 4, but when there's 12 of them, they literally can show snippets because there just is not time. They've kind of got to show everybody, so their focus is how do we tell this story. So, you know, and also the people, the sewing producer is part of the edit anyway, but generally speaking, the reason you have a sewing producer is because the producers making the program can't sew. So, you know, this was like my role on Unique Boutique. My job was to bridge the gap between who knows how to make telly and who knows how to sew a garment, and I can do both, so therefore that's my role. So you know, it is very intense, but I think they're all just so happy to be there that actually they don't see it as a negative. It's a bit of fun. Part of my job was to actually wander around and spot if anyone was making mistakes on picking, or, you know, they'd hide it under the table, or you know, and it was awful but also hilarious because I'd just go up to one of the story producers and go, they're unpicking, and they boom straight over, and they, you know, but it sort of became a bit of a joke, really. It was like, oh, don't show Becky what you're doing, or don't show the other, you know, the scene, the team, don't tell them I'm messing up. But that's the drama of the TV they want to do. But yeah, no, so they do deal with it all really, really well. I have to say, this challenge did make me shiver a bit, because one of the challenges I was responsible for was the Parker from last year, which was Music Week. I can't remember how many pattern pieces it had, but it was a similar amount, and I was given a calico finished version, and I had to, without taking it apart, deconstruct that garment and write sewing instructions for it, which was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it worked really, really well. But they did that in 6.5 hours. They were given that, you know, but they were originally given 5, and then they had to add time on. Something else to sort of point out is all of the pattern challenges are time tested. So another part of my job would be there was sort of me and maybe 2 or 3 others, is we would make it up and see how long it took us, and then we'd add on a bit, because we're all professionals sat at home. You add on a bit, and then you add on a bit because they've also got to stop and do interviews and talk and the rest of it. So it is time tested. They should, in theory, be able to do it without, you know, there's, when I say no interruptions, you know, you haven't got to go and make tea or go and do the school run or go to work, or they've got this dedicated time, but also they've got to try and fit it into a filming day. So it is difficult, but the fact that they did it in 5 hours, I think, is
incredible.
Yeah, incredible.
I remember years and years ago, going back to the dark ages, one of my jobs, I worked for a designer in Cambridge, and she would give every Friday, I think it was, she would give me a dress on a hanger. It was always Liberty, either Tana Lawn or Crepe de Chine, something like that. Anyway, she'd give me the dress, and then she would give me the pieces of fabric for, I think, about 6 copies off the top of my head, 800 years ago. And she would give me a pile of fabric that's already pre-cut. They had the facilities there, and like I say, the dress. And I would go home and do exactly what you said, Becky. I would have to deconstruct it in my head to be able to then work. You're working backwards. You're figuring out what was the first thing, and then, because you obviously couldn't deconstruct a beautiful dress, I guess. But it worked, because every week or every fortnight, I can't remember now, they were very similar. So you found out what the method was and where you should start, and it ended up being second nature. But having that thrown at you Well, I mean, I've seen over the last few weeks quite a few difficult things. But that, I thought, for me was, I'd have balked at that. I would think I would have been under the desk. Never mind having anything to unpick. I would be under the desk, hoping they thought I'd gone home. Yeah, but they did incredibly well. I was almost very proud of them, actually.
Yeah, I think was it you, Kim, who said about, I'm sorry, I can't remember who said about the leftover right?
Alistair, yes.
Alistair, yeah. And I think just to sort of add an addendum to that, the point of the pattern challenge is their ability, what they're testing is their ability to follow instructions and just obviously the quality of sewing. But it's basically, here's a set of instructions. We don't want you to use your imagination. This is the technical, how good are you at this? The transformation is nothing technical. They don't really care. They want to see your creativity and your design. And then the made to measure is bringing both of those elements in. So if they did replace the transformation, they'd have to add something else in to kind of, I don't know, anyway, that's not my problem. But the leftover right, it was a strict instruction that it was for a man and that it should have been that way around. So I disagree in that I think they were right to mark her down. But more than that, because you can have them either way, the storm flap was on the wrong side. So she was going to do it that way round. The storm flap needed to be on the other shoulder. So I think, you know, the technical elements of the pattern challenge, I think it is right. If the instruction says do X and you do Y, I do think it's right that that's not something that gets ticked. But I don't think I think Mia should have won it from not just that challenge, because Asma's was beautiful, but her buttons were all wonky.
Buttons were all wrong. Yeah.
Mia's looked amazing. It was sewn beautifully. The buttons were beautifully lined up. The only thing they said was that her sleeves weren't quite pitched quite right, which, I mean, I don't know about anybody else. I'm not a tailor, but I couldn't really see that from at home. It just looked like they were almost trying to find something to sort of say about it. But to put her as second to last in that challenge, I think they kind of got it wrong, got a bit backwards that way.
See, just going on Becky's point there, so the pitch, so anyone at home that doesn't know, so the pitch of the sleeve is literally, it's a mark on a commercial pattern that tells you at the top of the head of the sleeve, it gives you, so you have one notch at the front for the front of the sleeve, so you know which is left and right, and then you have a double mark, which is where you align the back. And usually, depending on how much ease you need to put in the sleeve, you're supposed to ease the amount given on the pattern here into that small section. And again, you should have some ease that you can put in here. But it depends on it. So for instance, Lady Diana's dress, you know, the big mutton thing, there's a lot of volume and a lot of ruching in there. But with the ease on these types of sleeves, the actual sleeve head itself is much larger than the actual armhole it's going into. So you have to get all that smoothed in. And if they had actually tacked it in,
we're going to see that
rather than pinning it, it's much, much easier. And the other technique to do is if you have the armhole facing around the outside and you slot the sleeve head inside, when you're pinning or basting, if you put this finger on the outside, which is on the armhole, and you use your thumb to just tweak it, and as you're going along, you're acting a bit like a ruffling foot, so you're actually easing that in, and take your time with it, because that will get you a really, really nice thing. But also, I don't know if you agree, Becky, but I don't think, for instance, because on the pattern, that pattern should have already have had the pitch of the sleeve in, so that should have had that notch in. So for them to be able to mark the fact that the pitch was wrong, whether or not Mia hadn't followed the pattern and she had just matched up the front and the back and not the top of the sleeve head, then that pitch is wrong. So a pitch of a sleeve, some commercial patterns for some reason have the arms going straight down, but no one stands like that. Your arm is always slightly bent forward, so a sleeve should go like a banana is the best to describe it, and both of them should be right. So what do you think about that? Do you think the the actual pitch should have was marked on the pattern, or do you think
it should have been? I mean, the patterns we would they would. I don't know who designed the patterns. They were all done before I sort of came on board, but they would be sent off and printed, and then we would cut them out and put them in those envelopes, and then those envelopes. So when they're given the patterns are already cut out, and they're all cut to a standard size, which is the size of the mannequins. But all of those markings are on there, and I'm quite fastidious about that stuff, and would go around, and if anything wasn't quite, I would go around with the Tipex pen. That's why when they said 32 pattern pieces, all I just said in my, because you've got to cut one for every person doing the challenge, and then you cut 5 spares, that one goes to editing, one goes to production, one goes to whatever. So like at the beginning you've got to cut 17 patterns, so this one would have been 9, but 9 patterns of 32 pieces. And so I heard this and I sort of was going, oh, I'm glad that wasn't one of mine. But yeah, I mean, if there was anything misprinted or anything, I would go around with the Tipex and a Sharpie and put it right. So I mean, I like I say, I can't talk for this particular pattern. 9 times out of 10 they were all perfect. But yeah, so they should have had all those markings on there, because I mean, Esme is a huge notch fan. I mean, she just seems to spend all the sewing bees walking around going, have you used your notches? So yeah, the patterns need all of that on there for her to be able to say, well, if you're not, you know, you've got to use your notches.
So did you agree ultimately, although it was funny as I started to watch it, because I think the editing gives away who's going to go out, because I really do. And I actually wrote down more or less at the beginning, Vicky was going home, and I genuinely didn't know that, just because of the way they're editing the show, and we've watched previous ones. Did you agree that Vicky was the one who went home this week? Becky, should I start with you?
Yeah, by all means. Yes, I think so. I think it wasn't really her week, bless her. I felt a bit sad because Vicky was one of our standbys from Series 8. So the first few weeks you have standbys who also prep projects, so that if anything were to happen, they can step in. But after the first couple of weeks, they're sort of dismissed, and Vicky was one of our standbys. So I've kind of spoken to her, worked with her on her made to measures. And then obviously she wasn't needed. So I was really pleased to see that she'd made it through to this. She'd obviously reapplied and actually made it through to the actual final 12. So from that point of view, I was a little bit sad to see her go. But yeah, no, she was lovely, really lovely. But definitely, I think it was her week to go, personally speaking.
What about you, Lizzie? What was your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree completely. And to be honest, at this stage, it's so hard, isn't it? It's a hair's breadth between them all. And some stand out more than others with certain things. You know, Asma has her own sort of way of creating, and she tends to be a bit samey, but she's obviously incredibly comfortable with that, and she's been stitching for years and years, hasn't she? And being a surgeon, my goodness me, her scars must be incredibly neat. And so I think she definitely deserved to stay in. Mia, I've always said from day one, I think Mia is possibly our winner, dare I say it. But I think because she's young, she's full of fun, she's creative, she's got a lot going for her, and all those years ahead of her that could be absolutely wonderful. Tony, I just think he's a bit of a wild card, because I don't think any of us perhaps expected Tony to get this far, but he's so good. He's a real dark horse, and some of the stuff that he's created has been amazing. And again, you kind of, I don't know, I still have my own opinions, guys, but over the period of the time, we're getting to know these people, and they're becoming our friends, aren't they? We get to know all about them and their little foibles, and I've been so pleased to see Tony reach every week. And it was one week that he got Garment of the Week, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I was so pleased for him, because you know, he deserved something. He deserved a reward. And I just feel sad for Vicky, because she's such a lovely girl, and I think she came into her own almost halfway through. I felt she was a bit like I can never remember her name. Is it Fove or Fave or something like that.
Yes.
Sorry, guys. Sorry, that's very rude of me. But anyway, I felt they were kind of loitering in the middle there somewhere. And I think it's only the last few weeks that she's sort of really come through and her own personality has come through. And she's such a dear. But of course, somebody has to go. And, you know, she made those fatal mistakes and that sort of set the seal, really, didn't it? But what an exciting final for next week. Can't wait.
Yeah. Alistair, did you agree?
I did agree. I did feel for. I did really feel for her. I think they should give everyone an even playing field, especially when it comes to you should give them all similar models, because all the other challenges are done on a mannequin, which I would imagine is a standard 12. So I would just say that you should give them models all of the same height and all the same size, and then it's an even playing field, because when you're dealing with a larger figure, there's so many other things that have to go into creating that. I mean, for instance, if you've got a large bust, that gravity is unfortunately a thing we all have to cope with, and you know, they're not going to sit up here, you know, which a commercial pattern thinks the bust area is, you know, it does fall down. So I thought Vicky was at a disadvantage, but I did agree with a lot of the critiques that she was getting, and it was a bit foolish when she actually put the studs in before she had made the garment up, because so much can happen in that time, and you know, things just weren't aligning correctly. I do think Tony's a bit of a wild card. I'm in a bit of I don't really actually, do you know what, I'm just gonna throw a guess out there. I think that obviously I think we're all being led to think that Asma's going to win, but I'm not sure whether or not she is going to win, because I think everything's going to be, so I think it's going to be between Tony and Maya.
Oh, what
did you think?
I think Maya's got such potential, and you know, we will see her regardless of whether she wins next week or not on our sewing circuit. We'll see a few of them. I know Matthew and Lauren are already on the sewing circuit and have been seen at a couple of the shows. But yes, I think Maya has got a lot of potential. I would love to see her win, because Asma's got a career.
Yes.
She isn't going to leave her career. And I think if there's an opportunity, and when you hear Maya's backstory, her mum got a sewing machine during COVID. She started to make a dress, didn't finish it, so she took over, and look where it's happened. So we're only talking that she's only been sewing for, yes, she's very young, but she has actually only been sewing, and it's been self-taught for just a couple of years. So I think her story is just great, and she's grown so much. And you know what it is? I love the fact that she rocks a Harry Styles you know, garment, and I love the fact that she's stayed where she is. She's the pink girl, and she's a girly girl. And yeah, how brave was she for the trench coat to bring pink in, because that was true to herself. So yeah, I secretly hope she wins. I really do, for not only for the show, but I think for her as well. I think it'll be a fantastic achievement.
Yeah.
And what did you think, Becky?
No, I was just going to add to your model thing about them all having the same models. That is kind of the aim, is that they have very similar build of models, and they are given all their models measurements in advance. Although sometimes the models measurements aren't overly accurate. Just to add that in there, they have to kind of trust them, and they're not always quite right. But they are. Is the aim, is that they all have like a standard size 12. 10 to 12 model, and that their heights are kind of within a sort of 3 or 4 inch range. I was quite surprised to see her model. I heard yesterday that she specifically chose that model. I don't know how true that is, and so it might be absolute, you know, Chinese whispers, because also, you know, they weren't given the opportunity to choose their own models when we did our series. But I part of me wonders if she did choose that model, because obviously Vicky's a slightly curvier girl herself, because they get all the clothes once the show's aired and they finish with them all, they send them all back to them. So maybe she wanted to be able to wear the stuff. I don't know. That's just my brain going, well, why would you want a model that was so different to everyone else's? But yeah, I don't know why she had a curvier model, because the aim was always to have a kind of level playing field. But then of course you're then excluding anybody with a slightly different body shape.
But then why not
and if you start to,
why not give everybody a curve? Yeah, I'm all for the models, not the standard catwalk model sizes, because I'm not. You know,
absolutely.
And in my head, if somebody asks, I'd love to say I'm a size 12. No, I'm not. I'm at least erring towards a 16. Let's be true to yourself. The label doesn't bother me. But what would have been great, because they have used different size models throughout this series, which I embrace and I think is marvelous, but give everybody that same size model. Alistair, I'm fully with you. It has to be a level playing field for everybody. So that is one of the ones. So we're all going to be watching next week, which will be really good. We're actually joined by Deborah, who was one of last year's finalists, and I'm looking forward to hearing her thoughts on this particular series. Obviously, you worked with her, Becky, on the last.
She's lovely.
And
one of my favourites, but I haven't got favourites.
You're not allowed to have favourites, Pet, no. And John,
she's absolutely lovely. You'll have a whale of a time with her.
And John Scott's also joining us, because he was on our first show. But the last question I'm going to ask you, Lizzie, was, has your opinion changed about the show? You were on our second show. Has your opinion changed from then to now?
Well, you know what? It hasn't. Because I see things differently to you guys. And I said, and I stand by what I said, and shoot me down, I don't mind. But you know what? First of all, I think you two, Alistair and Kim, I think you're brilliant, because if you're going to start doing little videos on like a follow-up. So when I was on, I think it was on, we talked about French seams and things like that. Well, if you wanted to, you can pop onto YouTube and you can look up French seam and you can learn that way. However, if you two professionals are going to do it, then absolutely brilliant. And you could follow the whole series through. I think somebody at one point did foundation paper piecing, of which my ears pricked up straight away. So there's lots of little techniques being thrown in the whole time. And that would be great if you followed that up with a little series of techniques. I think that's marvelous. But for me, yes, you go through the process of seeing this group of strangers, and they're developing their relationships and friendships all the way along. You see the highs and the lows. You see the drama, or you see the happiness or sadness, whichever way it is. And for me, that makes compelling viewing. And I see it from that point of view, that if that was my company, if that was my business, that's what I would be looking for. I'd be looking for entertainment, for the dramas, the highs, the lows, the dramatic, the wow moments, the oh my goodness, what were they thinking moments, because that's the ingredients of a great show. When it comes to the techniques, I know I know what you guys would like to see, but I know that there is no time for that, no time to show. Like, you know, you're saying about the walking foot, and I totally agree that the walking foot should be our best friend. But it's possible, for instance, that Tony and Mia have never used a walking foot in their lives. So it would be difficult to give a small technical tuition time on an hour, but I think that can be taken away, and if you guys can do that, then absolutely brilliant, you've got it made. So I haven't changed my opinion. However, I think they've done a cracking job, and each one of them has pulled the rabbit out of the hat. Perhaps not on one show, it could have been the next show or the previous show, but by golly, we've had some surprises. I think one of them was the Ashma's dress. I can't remember brain fuzz, but I can't remember which episode it was, but that beautiful fitted dress was just incredible. And that stays in your mind, doesn't it? And
Yes.
and that's what for me, that's what it's all about. It's that wonderful bit of entertainment that we look forward to. Like next week, we cannot wait, can we, to see what they do.
No.
Poor things.
Lizzie, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll put all the links on because Lizzie has the most fantastic clubs and tuition tutorials and community. Becky, you're doing an amazing thing. You've come out the box in respect of the traditional sewer is, we're talking about a size 12 model who is a particular height. So what you're doing on your journey is also great. What people don't realise is that Alistair Macdonald is one of the experts in the fashion industry. And if you watch him on Create and Craft TV, you're on this weekend, I know that. He comes with some pearls. I've known Alistair a long time, and every time we have a conversation, he'll come out, he just throws it in. So he has got so much knowledge, so to keep watching Alistair. But it's been absolutely brilliant that you've joined us. Thank you so much, because I don't think people realise that you're giving your time up to do this. We're all doing this for nothing. But
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you so much, ladies. It has been an absolute pleasure. Well, actually, no, my son will tell me off. I should have actually asked how you identify before I said ladies. So I will just call you people.
I identify as tired.
Okay, tired. I'm grumpy. Anyone else?
Before sewing
Sometimes
courses.
it's a who am I moment. It's like, who am I? What am I doing?
We'll call you Ditzy then.
Well,
You're not giving me a name.
I have a few, Kim Solomon. I have a few.
Okay, then.
It's been a really, really fun show this week. Well, all of them have been really, really fun, but it's been great to get people's insights into who, for Becky who worked on the programme.
yes.
And again, having Lizzie, with all your expertise and stuff like that. And again, Kim, we're all, the one thing that combines us is a sewing machine.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's been absolutely fantastic. So we're going to be joined by Deborah and John Scott next week, and that will be our last episode. So I hope everybody can join us, and we will have a giveaway, won't we, Kim, for the last one?
We might go big.
Oh, right.
I'm going to
Bring
comment.
You could get Patrick through the post.
It's not enough room in my workroom for Patrick.
He gets folded up and put in between my wardrobes in between, let me tell you.
I'm saying nothing.
No. Okie dokie, everybody. Thank you so much. And I'm going to say bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.